Today, I couldn't be more excited. We've got the incredible good fortune to talk to, I think, our first ever author from Canada, Miss Erin Bow. Erin Bow, how are you this morning?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Thank you so much for making the time to appear. And you are in your, for those watching on YouTube rather than listening, you are in your writer's shed this morning. Is that right?
I am, yeah. I call it the deep shed because, you know, sometimes I do deep work and sometimes I'm just in deep shed. So yeah, it's a little 9x7 shed in my backyard because I got a couple of kids and a couple of elderly parents and a big old fluffy dog in there. So it's kind of crazy in my house to write, and the shed is nice and quiet.
And I had read, we're gonna talk about all kinds of fascinating stuff. You know, we should tease the shed. I've got more questions for you about your writing shed. But okay. We should start by, for an esteemed audience who hasn't been stalking you online, reading your book, getting to know you as much as one can without talking to you first, please give them kind of an overview of your background and how you got started writing.
I'm one of those people that came late to writing. I was always a kid who had her nose in a book. I was always the go outside and play. I can see your flashlight under the covers kid. But it never occurred to me that like books were something that humans created. I guess I thought they just kind of came into the world somehow, like mayflies. So it never occurred to me that I could be a person who wrote books. So instead, I was a person who really liked science because I also imprinted on Carl Sagan like a duck. I give my age away, but yeah, the original Cosmos, I was just kind of like, that is so cool. So I studied physics. I worked for a while, just a year at CERN, the particle collider outside of Geneva. I went to graduate school and then I dropped out. So calling me a physicist is like calling a kid that dropped out of med school a doctor. It's my background and there's no other good shorthand, but you know, compared to the people who actually do research, I don't have a lot of training. Then I spent my 20s doing stupid things like answering telephones and writing manuals for flipping hamburgers before I finally got serious about writing. I wrote my first book, was a book of poetry, published it I was about 30, and it won a big award, and that kind of put me on the path. So now I have 2 books of poetry, a memoir, which absolutely nobody read, and 5 novels. 2 books of fantasy for young readers, for young adults. There's Plain Kate is a Russian-flavored fairy tale about a girl who sells her shadow and gets a talking cat, which is exactly what you need to escape the witch-burning mobs in Russia. Yeah, he gets her into more trouble than anything else, but you know, I firmly believe that all cats can talk, they just don't find us worthy. So this is that book.
Did you discover that at CERN?
No, I didn't.
Should we be concerned?
There were some very sad radioactive cats at CERN because the building I worked with, it's not underground like the ones are now. It was in the open air, like a big airplane hangar of a kind of place, and the animals would wander in and out.
So they had a radioactive pause kind of cross, and like, we can talk to you, but we're not going to because you made us radioactive.
I remember making friends with a particular cat in there and my supervisor going, oh, look, this one's still roughly symmetrical. Okay. I've been trying to make it up to cats ever since. Yeah. Sorrow's Knot's my second book. It's another fantasy. It's about a girl who inherits from her mother the power to repel the restless dead, which otherwise spread this kind of contagious, terrible madness. And she's very proud of her power. She's very secure in her place in her society and her traditions until mom dies. So it's a family book and a book about madness, and it's really creepy. This is the book that I wrote to the actual literal cabin in the woods to write, and that was a bad idea. That really super spooked me. And then there's
that cabin. We don't put a pin in that. We'll tease that as well. I want to know more about that cabin experience.
Okay. Scorpion Rules and the Swan Riders are a pair of young adult science fiction, political, post-apocalyptic, transhuman thrillers. The first one's set entirely on a goat farm in Saskatchewan, as they tend to be. And the second one has, mad artificial intelligences riding horses. So they're bonkers, but they're a lot of fun. They're big, serious, chewy, deep books, but they're also bonkers, and they have a lot of goats and humor in them. At this point, goats are kind of my brand. And then the newest one is the middle grade adventure Stand on the Sky, which young readers never get it, but old librarians will get it perfectly. Did you read Where the Red Fern Grows?
Of course.
Of course, right? The book about the boy, and he has the two dogs, and he raises them in this beautiful friendship, and then the cougar attacks the dogs, and they die. So the red fern grows up out of their grave. Spoiler. There's one really good reason to write books. It's out of spite. I wrote The Red Fern Grows with a happy ending. So Stand on the Sky is Where the Red Fern Grows, but in Mongolia with a girl and an eagle and a happy ending.
So why, we talk about almost anything. Let's spend a little time on Stand on the Sky, the brand new book that is available right now, esteemed audience. It's in bookstores. It's online. My God, where can't you get a copy? What was it? So I wanted to ask you about, because I'd read your quote about wanting to give Where the Red Fern Grows a happy ending. And so did you actually draw inspiration from that? Are there parallels between the two stories? I was really looking for them. I didn't see them.
I didn't go back and read it. I still haven't forgiven Wilson Rawls, actually. So I didn't go back and read it. It's just, I cut my teeth as a young reader of a certain age on books like Where the Red Fern Grows and on Sounder. Anybody read Sounder? And Shiloh and The Fledgling, which is about a goose, but also the goose dies. All of these books, Old Yeller. I read Old Yeller when I was a certain age. All of these books about a kid and an animal where the relationship with the animal transforms their place in their family and their identity. As a metaphor for growing up, usually, in these middle grade books. And then as a metaphor for finishing growing up, the animal dies. Almost always. And since I was always really more attached to the animals than to the human characters, I just couldn't stand it anymore. So I wanted one where it's the same metaphor, but it doesn't have the same ending. So the parallels are not exact. It's just kind of flavored.
Gotcha. So that's fun. Because when I read your quote, I thought, oh, well, how sweet. She must have really been inspired by this book she loved. And now I'm hearing, oh, pure spite.
I love the book, but absolutely pure spite. I'm about to go talk to high school students this afternoon, and I'm going to tell them, one of the best reasons to write a book is pure spite. You find the book that you hate, and you write the book that fixes it. Well, I don't know if you can hate it, but, you find the book that's broken or that breaks you in some way, and you write the book that fixes it. Or you find the book that they wouldn't give to you, that didn't exist, and you write the book that you need, So I think there are a lot of people doing that these days, which is fabulous to see.
When you write, do you have an ideal writer or an ideal reader in mind, or are you just writing for a younger version of you, or is it a little bit of both?
Usually it's a younger version of me. Usually I write the books. Well, I always write a book that I would want to read. I write the stuff that I like to read. I read a lot of middle grade. I read a lot of young adult. I read the occasional, just straight up adult book. I've lost track of science fiction, so I have trouble threading my way through the adult science fiction community these days. I still read, I'm Canadian, so read CanLit kind of stuff. But every once in a while you read this CanLit thing, and it's we moved north to find ourselves, and then we all died in the snow. And they don't tell stories. They're just extended set pieces and meditations, and they're beautiful, but I like stories. So I read young people's stuff because young people's stuff always has a story in it.
Most of the time. I can think of some glaring examples, but I do my absolute best to never author shame on the show, unless the target's so big that they won't care. So once in a while, I'll score a shot on J.K. Rowling or Stephen King. I don't think they're listening, but other authors, even if I even if I have spite toward their book, even if it has fueled me to write another story, I feel like, well, the worst thing that author did, unless they really did something bad, the worst thing they did was to try to entertain me and to increase our shared literary conversation, and that's okay. I wish you'd done it better, but I can't knock the goal.
That's a reasonable point. But I will point out that Wilson Rawls, who wrote Where the Red Fern Grows, is dead now. So,
but his grandchildren are listening and they're crying their eyes out.